to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Today is Wednesday, November 6th, 2024, and the time being 6 p.m. The meeting of the Water Board is called to order. At this time, please silence all electronic devices. Donna, roll call.
Sorry, hang on, space out. I am totally spacing out, I apologize. Scott Mangles.
Here.
Frank Massey.
Here.
Patrick Kennedy.
Here.
Tony Higginbotham.
Here.
Brian Maddox.
I'm here. Approval of minutes. Mr. Massey, any additions or corrections?
No, sir, I didn't see any.
Anyone else? Minutes will stand as presented. Old business, I see we have none. New business, water rate study. Ms. Brooke?
Oh, no, I'm good. Thank
Okay.
you though. Probably don't even need the microphone, I'm really loud. I'm Brooke Chalet with Greedy Financial Group. I also have Lauren back here with me. The past several months, we've been working through the water rate study along with all these studies, but we're focusing on the water and really working with the city on the projects coming up, where we're at as far as since the last rate study. So I'll just go through, kind of hit on the executive summary. I won't go through the full report unless you guys would really like for me to do that. It's kind of a lot, so I would stick to just the main pieces that you all probably care about. And tonight, just before we dig into it too much, nothing has to be voted on. It's just a recommendation to council before we do the introduction there. So for water, the test year is based on 2023, and then we also implemented adjustments based on conversations with Donna. Inflation is in there, and that is purely just O&M inflation that has been worked into the test year as well. And then we have also taken into account the increase in salaries that will be passed with your salary ordinance for the city. So the total O&M budget for 2020 for your current rates and in this rate study with all those adjustments is $2,026,000, just a little bit more. We also take into account the debt. So one thing to note is you guys do have the 2007 bond maturing in 2028, so that's pretty soon. So that will be falling off. For purposes of the rate increase, we use an average max debt service. We don't technically use your max debt service. So it is at $1,905,000. And then your maximum debt service is the $1,908,000. So really close, but for purposes of the rate study, that is just a 5-year average for your debt service. And your debt service coverage is well beyond exceeded, so you guys are doing great there as far as SRF and your debt covenants are concerned. And one thing we always know is you guys do have capacity for additional debt. It's just that in doing additional debt, you would then revisit your extensions and replacements, which we'll get into in just a little bit. But I always like to note that if that capacity is there. And stop me at any point if you have questions. So the biggest part of this rate study that we want to look at is typically Greensburg has historically tried to pay for as many projects as they can with cash on hand. You guys have done a fantastic job with keeping ahead of the rates. You're always proactive, and it's definitely a breath of fresh air when we're working through these rate studies. So we work with mayor, Donna, superintendents, and we do the most important projects and kind of lay them out, and they worked through those a lot. So what we got to is for the average capital spending, once again, we're averaging that out so that way it makes your rate reasonable, is $1,650,000. So that's the amount we're going to recommend transferring every year into that capital fund to fund those projects. in the capital improvement plan in the executive summary you guys have should be on the very last page on those individual years, so you can see those projects and what exactly they are. And then with those, that brings us to our final, what rate do we need to be able to fund this and keep coverage and do O&M, pay those additional salaries, things like that. So with that, you're looking at about a $10 a month increase when the final phase is done. So when it's all said and done, it's about $10 difference in their monthly bill, just based on an average of 4,000 gallons, which is historically what we try to base it off of. And for the typical process that we're recommending that be broken into 3 phases, starting January 1, 25, and then 26 and 27. That way it just falls with your current structure on how we've historically done rates in Greensburg. The other part that I want to hit on that is a little, you guys have not seen in a report from us before. We did take a look at your non-recurring fees. So currently you have a connection fee, and for 5/8 inch meter or less it's $750. For 1 inch it's about $1,000, and then anything greater than that is actual cost of materials and supplies. So what we looked at is what's called a capacity fee and an availability fee. And to explain the differences really simplified, a capacity fee is to cover the cost or recoup the cost of the capacity that's going to be sent from that residential home or from that commercial building to the plant, so they can maintain the plant in order to take on that capacity and it not be put on user rates. An availability fee is the cost it takes the city to actually connect that person. It more so mimics the connection fee, but it's to extend those facilities. So those are the biggest differences. So availability is based off of collection, and capacity is more so maintaining the infrastructure for the additional demand. With your capacity fee, the proposed capacity fee, just based off of your current assets, your current debt, and your current EDUs, is a little over $2,000 per EDU. So that would be saying a residential technically costs the city around $2,000 of additional demand going to the plant. So right now you're at $750. That doesn't have to be touched. You can leave it as if. You can adopt somewhere up to $2,000. That's just gives you an idea kind of where that's at currently. And then availability fee is on an individual basis. So it is calculated. We can actually flip the report open for this one because it is a little bit different. If you'll go to page 17. So we still look at the total invested capital, we look at your annual debt service rather than your outstanding debt principal, and if there is any pilot made, and then your total annual dedicated facilities cost, including your O&M. So that's another difference of the capacity versus availability fee. And then the highlighted sections where if you implemented this and someone came to Donna and was looking at it, she would plug in how many linear feet of main frontage and the number of benefiting properties. And then as you can see, the equation just kind of feeds itself, and then that would equal their monthly charge up until the point they connected. So it's not an annual fee, it's just when someone starts that development, this charge would begin, and then once that connection is made, charge is done. Capacity fee is just a one-time, not set up monthly, just a one-time fee that person would pay to connect. So just wanted to point out the differences. Like I said, you don't have to do any changes. We just wanted to take a look at it for you since it had been a minute since those connection fees or anything had been reviewed. And then provide that information for you guys. And I just went through a whole lot of information, so if anyone has any questions, I'm happy to go back through it.
Mr. Mayor, do you have anything you'd like to add?
As Brooke alluded to, over the last 6 months, we've been working through this process, and she also noted it doesn't require you to vote on it. It requires a sort of favorable recommendation to the council, to the Board of Works. That's going to be presented next Tuesday. With the kind of short timeline between the meetings, we wanted to be sure you had an opportunity to look at that. The capital plan does include 2 pretty massive capital projects that Superintendent Denny and Donna and I have worked through with the Reedy Financial folks. The first one is the North Broadway water main that continues to kind of blow apart in chunks, and from 4th Street all the way under the bypass and on 10th over to Lincoln. That's a very big piece of this entire rate study, is that section. I think we would probably agree, this board's very aware of it, that that's not really an optional project. That's one that we must do. We have the ability to do it inside our rate study, so we don't have to necessarily go borrow money. SRF, the State Revolving Fund, does seem to be very over-programmed. We will continue to look at those options, but if you incur the debt, obviously you have to have a funding mechanism to pay the debt. And then the second one is something I believe Darren's also going to talk about tonight, but that's been on the plan for a very long time, is connection from Delta Faucet on around out to where like the sweetie shop, the ice cream shop at the fairgrounds is, to help the west side business fire protection, water flow, and then water quality. It's been on Rick's radar for years and years and years, and Darren and Rick's radar. That is sort of phase 1, if you will, because with the Park Road reconstruction project in 28, that will also have waterline improvements made from Ryle Addition to 200 West, and then that will actually complete our water main loop on the west side of town. So those are the 2 major capital projects that are there's a lot of other sort of small stuff. Operations obviously was mentioned, vehicle replacement, those items that we have to kind of have in order to keep the utility running, but those are the 2 major infrastructure projects that are included in this rate study. I guess I would ask that you favorably recommend it to the council. And then they can hammer that out next week.
Board, does anybody have anything for Brooke?
Do we have to set a number on that capacity fee, or can we leave that as that open-ended $750 to $2,100-ish?
That would be what council would essentially determine, I guess, if they want to. If you had a recommendation to them, you can also just leave it as it is.
Okay. So leaving it at kind of as an open range is okay.
On the ordinance piece?
On the recommendation piece.
Oh, yeah, no, you don't even, you can just put a favorable recommendation for the report. If you wanted to add a little bit of language in there, you can, but.
Okay.
I'll make a motion that we recommend this report to the council.
I'll second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, say the same. Recommendation, move forward. Thank you, Brooke.
Thank you so
Thank you.
much. Thank you for your time.
Mr. Burkhardt.
Good evening. Let me pull this back up here. I'm going to kind of try and give you a very brief overview of where we are at with PR for the SRF. And so kind of where we're at and going forward, some of the projects that were just discussed are part of this, are included in this PR, whether you end up using SRF funding or not. It's it gives you options down the road if that depends on what you want to do. Just kind of real briefly, so we can kind of PR is broken down into basically 6 chapters, and there's kind of the current conditions basically just, what we have to do is we have to kind of assess what your current conditions are, your capacities, and all the things. And then you look at your needs. That's chapter 2. What do you need? What needs improvement? To give you a very brief overview, you know, your surface water is in good shape. Your groundwater plants, you've had some improvements just into that last year. It's in good shape. Your source water supply seems to be holding steady. And your flow rates have not significantly increased. We looked at this, we did all this work back in 2016 when we were getting ready to plan for the surface water treatment plant. And I was actually amazed how consistent it has been since that. The flow rates have been very consistent. Your top 10 users are the same top 10 users. In reality, it's really the top 4 if you really look at that. So it's very consistent. So a lot of that stuff we're going to incorporate in that we had before. We obviously do our upgrades to the new surface water plant and those improvements. Probably the one thing that, and SRF makes you look at your system overall over a 20-year planning period. And one of the things we looked at, we have to project flows based upon historical numbers. We utilized your comp plan that was done, I think, in 2022 or 2023. We looked at the land uses of that and projected some of the water flows from that. What we're looking at, we're seeing somewhere in the neighborhood of like an average day in 20 years of being 4.57 or something like that. So, currently right now, your average day is about 2.3. Make sure I go in. I did take some notes for that. Yeah. Current your average day is 2.3. You have capacity for, your surface water is 5.5 with 1.2 from your groundwater. So you're in good shape from current capacity. We're projecting that in 20 years you can see an average day of 4.5. When you get to that average day, if you do get to that average day, I will caution you the one thing that probably is not quite up to speed at that point is your upland reservoir. I think we've probably had this discussion before. The upland reservoir is there because your surface water supply is subject to a drought condition of about 120 days or 3 months. So you have to have capacity in that upland to overcome that drought condition on the river. So right now you're fine at the average day of 2.3 or whatever. When you get to the 4.5, you keep in mind you're probably going to need more storage from that standpoint. So existing conditions, that's kind of where you're at. So, and what we're going to talk about a little bit today is the evaluation alternatives on the 4 projects, and those are 5 projects actually. Projects being the existing elevated tank down on the south side, we just showed there. And then we're also going to look at 4 water line projects. One of them being Broadway from 4th to north of the bypass to Smith Road, and then 10th Street from Broadway to Lincoln Street. And then the second project is the railroad crossing on West Main. It's a short railroad crossing there by Co-op. And then the third project is Park Road from Center Riley Drive to basically the animal shelter. And then from the animal shelter back toward the sweet shop. That section was done a year or so ago when the county highway garage went in. And then the 4th project would be the loop from the sweet shop there up around to State Road 46 and by Delta Faucet. So those are the 4 projects, and I will try to not bore you with all the details, but we'll go to that chapter here real quick. And we're just going to pull up a couple pictures Okay, down through here. So here's, when we looked at the evaluation for the elevated tank, we looked at 3 sites, and we looked at either 500,000 gallons or 1,000,000 gallons, and we also looked at rehabbing the existing. So those were the projects that we looked at. And to kind of recap, you know, here is the green dot, here is your existing tank. This is the site number 1, which is just south. Then we have another site over here off of 46, right there by Delta Faucet, in that area there. And then the third site was up here. If you remember, this site's getting a little bit farther away. What we're trying to do is to boost the whole water system down in the southwest part of the city. When you get up here, even if connecting that, it doesn't have near the impact, so that site was kind of eliminated from that standpoint. This site here obviously requires some land acquisition and some additional, you know, this additional water line in order to make that a viable site. This existing site, or this site over here, basically was probably the cheapest as far as putting a new tank in, because you don't really have to have a lot of additional water main associated with that. So, and then I'll get to, I'm not going to bore you with all the details. We have lots of modeling that we did to come up with our recommended alternative. And you can, I'm not going to, that's too much there. We got all kinds of graphs. I guess one thing to point out, when you have graphs like this, when they're all the same like that, you really, alternatives are pretty consistent, so there's not a clear-cut winner from that standpoint. So, and now we're to what everybody wants to talk to about the money. Alternative 1 or 2 and 3. Alternative 1 in any of the SRF is to do nothing. You always have to have a do nothing alternative. Alternative 2 is basically rehab that existing tank where it's currently at and do no water main improvements. That you can do that. The thing that doesn't, it really doesn't improve your fire protection and boost the water or the water flows in that southwest thing. Alternative 3 is to rehab the existing tank and then add some of the water line projects. So 4 and 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 are 1,000,000 gallon tanks. 4, 5, and 6 for the different various sites. Really the clear-cut winner from a standpoint analyzing everything is if you rehab the existing tank, you know, that's the cheapest or the lowest cost alternative. It allows you to keep that infrastructure or that facility another 25 plus years. If you do a complete rehab, that tank's good for another 25 plus years. Building a new tank, you probably got 50 plus years or better. So that it's a little trade-off on how much time you got, but the idea behind this is that, you know, if you go and build a new tank, you know, you're over $4 million. You can do a lot of water main replacement too for that kind of money. So if you're kind of trying to maximize your dollar in with this next rate case or this period of time, you can get some water mains done. You can get the elevated tank rehabbed for the same dollar amount or similar dollar amount as if you were just to do the tank. So our recommendation would be at this point would be to just rehab that existing tank. The one thing I will point out is from a scheduling standpoint, I would do the water main projects first and get that loop done, so that when you do take this, one of the disadvantages of rehabbing that tank is you have to take it out of service. And so you lose some fire protection and some flow rates there. So it helps if those water lines have been looped already before you take that tank out of service. So if you're scheduling these projects, the elevated tank would be at the back end. makes sense. Okay, now I'm gonna talk about a little bit about the Broadway, and I think instead of I'm just gonna go to the picture so you guys make sure.
Gary, before we move forward, I do want to ask, when we go back to the tank discussion,
Yep.
you know, should we be considering any future development or growth within the community when we're trying to decide what to do with the tank?
You can. We looked at that one site we looked at was to potentially for the growth. The problem with it is if you do something and until that growth comes, then that asset is not near as valuable to you when it's stuck way out there and there's nothing it's really serving. And you run a risk of you're not getting that tank turned over, so you get kind of stale water, so to speak, and that becomes more of an operational issue for Rick if it's not turning that tank over. So it's, yeah, ideally you'd like to be able to say, oh yeah, growth is going to be here, let's put the tank out here. Until you got the demand out there, putting that tank out there potentially cause a lot of operational issues with that too. So I don't know that it's the best value you would spend at the time. So, but it is. I mean, it would be if you believe, you know, if you had a crystal ball and you do, all the growth is going to go that direction. Yeah, maybe it makes a little more sense to try to move it out a little farther out west. But it really, the tank really didn't have that much of an impact where we placed it, as long as it was within that loop. Now we didn't, our evaluations didn't go a lot farther out, but so.
Have you looked at any site like on Park Road for that tank site over there to keep it right on the loop?
You can, but from a modeling standpoint, we will, when where the existing tank is, that there's a line, it's almost like it would be from a model, it's that whole main line that line comes straight from the plant south, crosses over there, and then goes down Ireland Street and comes around. So any place along that main loop there, it's on that. So again, to kind of walk through the Broadway Street, you're talking, we'll start at the bottom here, you're at 4th Street and Broadway. We're going up to there, and then we get to 10th, and we're going over to Lincoln, and then we're shooting across up to Smith Road and getting across the bypass. That's kind of the project limits. We looked at a couple alternatives. One was to do nothing, obviously based upon the last 6 months of water main leaks. That's not an option. But from SRF, it has to be. Alternative 2 was basically an open cut installation, typical water main installation. And then alternative 3 was to what we call trenchless technology or directional drilling the entire main. Right now that cost looks, it's a little better than the open cut. Part of that is because all the work is in the pavement, so open cut you're going to have a lot of pavement restoration, you're going to have a lot of granular backfill that's in the pavement, so that drives up the cost. The disadvantages to directional drilling: one, you're going to have to upsize pipe diameter, and you're going to go with HDPE pipe, which is good pipe. It's just the city in the past has not utilized that pipe, so they'll have to buy, you know, some of the fittings and taps will have to be a little different than what they're used to doing. My biggest concern is that we're looking at this from 10,000 feet. Till we get into the detailed design, I don't really know exactly what's all out there. It may be a case where we have to put every utility in, and there may not be a clear-cut way to directional drill it, and it may come that it's not even a viable option. The other directional drilling, you have to go somewhat in a straight line. So if you were looking at, if we have to jog from one side of the street to the other, then that's just more set pick points where you have to, set the machine and re-drill it. So that's a concern I would have, that there isn't a straight shot. The other concern I would have is that if there's any, we're not real deep, we're just waterline, so there may be a little bit of potential settling if things did go, so that you may get a little dip. So, and that's not good for the roadway. So, right now we've got it in there as that, and I will still need to evaluate that a little more. I'll take recommendations or thoughts from you guys as well. And what I've suggested after this, we'll probably schedule a meeting with Rick and the mayor and Zach and maybe one or two of you guys, so it's not a quorum or whatever, and we can kind of flush out some of those additional details. And so that would be my suggestion.
Did you have to bore that bypass anyway?
Right now, we have costs in there to jack and bore, traditional jack and bore, not directional drill. It's the more expensive of the two. We have had some success. It kind of depends on which section of NDOT you're working in. Some of the districts will allow you to directional drill water lines. Some still require you to jack and bore. So we haven't explored that, but we kept the most expensive option in there for that. So.
Rick, do you have any thoughts on the drilling underground with a different pipe type?
That's not my favorite way to do it. Obviously, we'd like to pretty much have C900 is what we use now, C900 or ductile. I've never messed with the HDPE pipe, so I don't know. I know our tapping machines and all of our equipment, it wouldn't work on it, so it's other tools, so to speak, that we'd have to invest in, so
That's.
I don't know that much about it, honestly.
It's done. I mean, it's a viable method of doing it. It's just something that hasn't been done here in the past. So, and that's one of my concerns is that I still want to flesh that out. I was surprised when the numbers came in where they did. So, I'm still a little skeptic on it. So I'll be honest with you. But
You're thinking that number's a little low?
I think that my biggest concern is I don't know that you'll be able to find a corridor, a straight line corridor that you can actually use to directional drill. And I think there's going to be so much stuff in the way that you're going to have to pothole or excavate all these little spots. And if you're going to do all that, there's no advantage to the trenchless. You're basically having the whole thing opened up anyway.
That's gonna push the cost up too.
Yeah, anytime you have to do that, so, we estimate a little bit based upon that, but like I said, we're still looking at it from a very high level until we, have a little more information, and probably we may not make that final decision until we get into detailed design, where we actually have the survey out there and we get the locations for all the utilities and that sort of thing, so yeah.
Thank you.
Yep. The second project, which is this crossing of the 46 of the railroad, we looked at two options of three. One, do nothing, which isn't viable. The other one is to basically do on the south side of the road within the roadway. And the third one is get an easement, and that's a blue line. And that is the preferred option. Basically, it's a little longer length, but the impact as far as traffic goes would be a significant less. And I think the one on the west side is actually city property, so I assume they'd be easy to get an easement from. And then I think that's viable. Cost-wise, we're looking. There's not a big difference, but alternative 2, which is the blue, or within the easement, is the alternative 3 is the lower cost option for that. And then let's go to the Park Road. From Center Drive to the west side of Muddy Fork Creek. Get the picture up here. There you're looking at there, you're starting over here by Center Drive, and because you have your existing 10-inch line stops at this point, and the new one picks up at this point, so there's a gap in between there that's currently served with some older lines, a cast iron, I believe, and some 6- and 8-inch line. The idea would be that we go from this point to that with a 12-inch line, and we looked at you know, whether we stay in an existing right-of-way or within easements. It looks like we could do it within easements and save, be a little cheaper. Again, we looked at this at just either open cut or directional drill. But because a lot of this is outside the roadway, open cut's the more favorable option in this case. I will point out that there's some existing landscaping and housing that chokes this point, that kind of makes a real choke point right down in this area here that may warrant dropping down and running this last half on the south side of the road versus trying to run it all on the one side of the road. That may or may not be done, but those are details that will get flushed out during design. The other thing to point out is you have Muddy Fork Creek, or a portion of tributary Muddy Fork Creek. That line there will have to be directional drilled under the creek from environmentals to minimize environmental impacts. So. And that cost to open cut came in alternative 1.26 versus directional drill 1.4. So, and then the last one here, I'll try to show you the picture here real quick. Okay, like I think we said earlier, this section of this existing has just been installed. What we do would we pick it up at this point, and we'd go up this county road up to 46, and then we loop back over here to tie into that the existing line and State Road 46 there over there in front of the factories. Basically, we looked at trying to stay within the roadway right-of-way or just in an easement. And it looks to be easement is the alternative. There seems to be enough room along this corridor to stay outside the roadway in an easement. Other than right down next to this intersection, you've got the tennis courts and this basketball courts. It's really tight there. We'll have to be out in the roadway in that area there. We do have a railroad crossing right here, and then you have the 46 crossing as well. We will have to jack and bore the railroad, and you can't do anything but jack and bore, and you can't do anything but ductile iron pipe. So there'll be jack and bore and ductile iron pipe underneath the railroad. We kicked around the idea of doing that one big bore and just bore the whole thing, but you know there is areas there where we could separate it, and if we don't have to jack and bore 46, that would be a little cheaper. And we're still trying to flush out some of the concerns we have with this proposed route. There's a real steep grade in this section right here. If we try to stay within the easement, there's a big, about a 7 foot embankment. Obviously, we have to get them an easement from this farmer and be in his farm field. And then also getting across in here, I think, is probably the better option than trying to navigate next to the right-of-way, and you got a bridge for the creek crossing here. So I think that probably, and the other idea behind, if you stay within the existing right-of-way and the state ever decides to do roadway improvements, then you would be subject to having to relocate your water line at your dime. So if you can get the easements, it's the preferred option as well. So, but some of the details we thought about trying, instead of crossing 46 here, that we would cross closer to the creek, like up in here. It gets a little flatter. My only concern is it's my understanding that there's some contaminant soil in this area. So I don't know that makes the most sense if I don't want to necessarily put a water line in where there's a lot of contaminant soil. So we may not have that option. So, but and I'll try to wrap it up here real quick. The cost there, staying within or going in the easements and staying outside the pavement. Alternative 3 comes in at 1.56 right now, so. And like I said, we are just continuing to work through this. We're working on a recommendation chapter, finalizing some of those costs. The environmental section, I think there's 12 points that we have to, like historical preservation, Lake Michigan mitigation, which doesn't apply here, but there's like 12 different points that we have to go through. Floodplains, we will be crossing some creeks, so we'll have to do that. Farmland conversion, and like I said, there's 12 different points for each of these projects. We will go through and address each of those, and that's the environmental section. And then the last chapter 6 is is the public participation and that sort of thing. So what I would suggest is that we have this kind of meeting, we try to get this thing finalized, and we look to do a public hearing sometime, probably the first of the year would be my guess. I'd like to have this kind of a meeting that we have, and then kind of work through all the final details, and then at that point in time, you're going to know about your potential rate increase that some of these projects could be affected by, and we'll have a better understanding of how this whole thing will play out in time frame. So, thoughts? And I can email this to all of you if you really want to fall asleep some night.
So if you put the water line in the right of way of the highway, and they decide to make it a 4-lane, and you move it on your dime?
Yeah, we do a lot of projects with utility relocations. Yeah, that's one of the risks you take when doing that, is that if they decide to expand, and even sometimes the thing is that if you put an easement right outside the right of way and they expand their right of way and you had the easement already, then they will pay to move your line. So yeah, that's one of the, you always gotta caution communities that if they're, if they're trying to avoid having to get easements or, land acquisition and stay within existing right-of-ways, there is a risk associated especially in state, if they decide they need the right-of-way. Other questions? That's a lot of information. I tried to boil it down as quickly as possible, so.
What's the next steps?
I would like to kind of have a steering group or whatever that could meet, and we could dig a little more into the details and the weeds and kind of flush out any of the concerns we have and any concerns Rick has about what we've chosen, so that we could kind of finalize our recommendations that we put into the report. So I guess I'd be asking that you have some volunteers that wants to set some time and spend an hour or two going through those projects. So.
I'd love to volunteer.
Okay.
Tell me when.
Okay. Anybody else want to join that group? Okay. Okay. I'll try to set something up and find what's on Rick and the mayor's calendar the next couple of weeks here. We're getting closer. We made a lot of progress. I had one of my young engineers halfway through this thing decide that she wanted to take a different job, and so so she's now down in Houston. So I got another person involved in the last couple of weeks, and he's picked it up real well. So.
Anybody else have anything for Derek? Looks good. I appreciate your clarification on everything.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Sleep. We're still here.
Good evening, Board.
Good evening.
I am here tonight to present to you HWC's agreement for Park Road design, contract administration, and construction. Craig Ludeman with HWC is also here, so any technical, in-depth questions, he is available to answer. Just to get started, the city and county are working on the Park Road project that has been going on for the last few years and is set to be let February of 2028. So while we were working on that, looking at the water line, Darren kind of gave you the preface of that project of needing to replace a section between the counties. New line they just put in last year with our 10-inch line that we put in a few years ago to try to get that to be one congruent piece of utility asset. This is to fill that about a 4,000 foot gap of new line. So that goes part into phase 1, part into phase 2 of Park Road. HWC is able to work with HNTB on PER, SRF funding, all that requirements. HWC is currently teamed up with USI, and those two design firms are designing Park Road, which is why HWC is kind of taking the lead on designing the water line. They have all the survey, they have plans already. It's not a complete start over, whereas HNTB could potentially just be starting all over with the survey and all that work. So that is kind of why we've brought HWC in for this water line. You can see they kind of broke it out: design phase, bidding phase, construction administration phase, and then the actual construction inspection phase. So if anybody has any questions on that so far.
Mr. Weigel show up?
I was hoping he would. He's more the technical guy. And he knows Darren a lot better than I do. So.
Yeah. It was my big brother, Kurt.
Craig, is there anything you want to add to it?
Basically, just we're already designing the roads. We've already done the survey and a lot of things of that nature. So you're going to save. There's some savings built into this. And work with Darren. It was kind of like, hey, you're already out there. Go ahead and take care of this. We'll work on the other projects with everything going on. So we're not here to steal any thunder from HNTB or anything like that, because they're your preferred provider and that type of thing. It's just a matter of us being in that area providing that service already. So.
What do we need to do?
We didn't make a motion.
We do need to make a motion to sign the contract with HWC.
I'll make a motion, sign a contract with WC.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, say same.
So Mr. Weigel, Frank Massey said that.
I will. I will.
It's my kind of meeting.
Sure time.
Did you see anything about?
So I just wanted to give you an update on the EPA mandated here 3, 4, 5 years ago what it was. They updated the lead and copper rule, and the first phase of that was to do an inventory of utility side, customer side. So my guys the last year and a half, 2 years, been out opening pits, digging up whatever they need to do to figure out what we had. We compiled all that information together, put it on a spreadsheet, and we have to send out letters that might be going out today. We'll get into that here in just a second. Letters to if we got galvanized on our side, their side, or the unknowns. We have roughly 200 letters going out for our side, which is pretty good, out of 5,400 service lines. I think there's a little over 800 on customer side to let them know they have galvanized on their side, and then I think we had like 100 or something like that of the unknown. So once they get those letters on the unknown, they're supposed to contact us. We'll figure out a time we can come, and even if we have to look in a crawl space or whatever to help the the residents figure out what they have on their side, so. That's where we're at. I did put 3 different letters together, and Donna's girls, like, picked them up and made them sound like really good. So I'd like to thank them for that, and I think they're gonna be sent out this week, is that correct?
We outsourced a couple of them through the ones that do our bill paying, or send our bills for us. And then we finished up the ones and dropped them in the mailbox tonight for property or residents that are living there. And we also sent a batch out to the property owners, since they would be the ones that would have to work with that. And that's the ones that have lead lines.
Okay, perfect.
So everything should be out and on their way.
So,
Basically,
oh, sorry.
what will the letters be saying?
Just notifying, the residents if there's galvanized on our side, galvanized on their side, or if we do not know what is being feeding their meter pit. So all that is with your lead, and galvanized is pretty much lead, is, obviously if your water sits in that galvanized line overnight, over 6 hours, it's got that potential to leach that lead out into the water. So one thing, galvanized was great 50 years ago. Now look what we got. So one thing